I'm continuing this program with talks on some of the fundamental ideas of Oriental philosophy. But before going on, I want to refer back to something that I said in the last program, in which I was talking about Hinduism, which may possibly have been misunderstood. At the end of the program, I was referring to certain trends in modern Hinduism, which I described as being of a somewhat namby-pamby nature. Perhaps that wasn't quite the right phrase, because that suggests weakness. What I really wanted to suggest was bloodlessness, lack of earthiness, or excessive spirituality. And I think this arises in certain schools of thought from a wrong interpretation of the great commentator Shankara. Shankara and Ramanuja are probably the two of the greatest medieval Indian commentators on the Upanishads and the traditional scriptures. And the way some people interpret this is somewhat as follows: that there is but one reality, which is Brahman, which is without form, without any quality that the mind can imagine, following the usual method of description by negation, and that this being so, it excludes there being any reality whatsoever to the seeming multiplicity of the physical world. In other words, the physical world that we perceive with our senses is in reality simply not there. And there is even no cause within reality for its seeming to be there. And this is rather like the Christian Science doctrine of mortal mind, producing the era of suffering and physical existence. That it has no reality at all, and our seeing of it, its seeming to be real, again, has no basis within the divine reality, which is the sole thing that exists. Now, this is an interpretation of Shankara which I believe to be fundamentally wrong. I don't believe that Shankara can correctly be interpreted as saying that the world of sense experience, which this, to my mind, wrong interpretation of his school identifies with Maya, I don't believe that this is the way he ought to be understood. Maya, I can think of passages in Shankara where Maya is given a much more positive sense, where the world is not to be considered identical with Brahman in the sense that it's not really there and Brahman is the only reality which exists, but rather that the world is Maya, or is illusory, only in the sense that we do not see it to be one with Brahman, just as it is. The seeing of its oneness with Brahman does not involve its disappearance. And if it does, then we've got not a non-dualistic doctrine at all, we've got an extremely dualistic doctrine. Because after all, if there is the seeing of an illusion, supposing you say what you see as the illusion isn't really there, but you can't deny the fact that you see it. And then if that seeing of it has no basis in reality, if that in turn is an illusion, and the illusion that one sees an illusion is an illusion, then you've got a principle that is fundamentally distinct from the supreme reality, and in a way stands against it, is not explained by it, is not grounded in it. And therefore this is a highly dualistic form of thought, and as a result, all fundamental dualisms lead to consequences in feeling and in conduct which are world-hating. And this seems to me why there are trends in modern Hinduism to be excessively spiritual, to regard all sense knowledge as basically evil, in the sense of being fundamentally, and I mean fundamentally, unreal. And this, in other words, is what I wanted to indicate about these trends in modern Hinduism which I do not feel are representative at all of either Shankara's doctrine or the doctrine of the Upanishads, upon which the whole tradition of Hinduism is based. Now then, today I want to go on to the subject of Buddhism. Buddhism originates in India, somewhere between 6 and 500 BC. There is always some conjecture about the exact dating of individuals at this time, but it was during this period that there lived a man called Gautama. And Gautama was the son of a king, or perhaps tribal chieftain, who lived very close to modern Nepal in the north of India. And Buddha is a title given to this man. It wasn't his proper name, just as Christ is not, as it were, the surname of Jesus, as when we say Jesus Christ. We should correctly say Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Anointed One. And in the same way one should say not Gautama Buddha, but Gautama the Buddha, for Buddha means an awakened one. A man who woke up, who, in other words, you must understand this term within the whole Hindu tradition, a man who is no longer spellbound by Maya, by the seeming separateness of all the things in this world. That's one of the forms of Maya. And so a Buddha is not a unique historical character. There can be, and it is supposed that there have been, innumerable Buddhas. But the idea of a Buddha is related to the Hindu idea of an avatar, which means an incarnation of the Godhead in human form. Buddhists don't think of a Buddha as an incarnation of the Godhead, because they, although not rejecting the idea of God or gods, relegate all gods to the world of Maya, to the world of relative reality. And in this sense, a Buddha is felt in some way to be superior even to the gods. Let's put it in this way. Perhaps some of you have seen what is a sort of fundamental illustration of the principles of Buddhism, a diagram or map-like thing called the Wheel of Life. And in Tibetan versions of the Wheel of Life, you will notice that the wheel is divided into 6 realms. And these 6 realms include human beings, gods, or perhaps angels would be a better term for devas, spirits of wrath called asuras, personifications of the destructive forces of nature, animals, then what are called naraka, or purgatories, preta, or tormented, frustrated spirits with tiny mouths and immense bellies, having, in other words, immense appetite but very little means of satisfying it, and then again humans. And the basic idea of Buddhism is that awakening, Buddhahood, can be attained only from the human state. Deliverance from the vicious circle which the wheel represents, life considered as a vicious circle. The gods are too powerful and too happy to concern themselves to be delivered. At the opposite extreme, the people in the narakas, the tormented souls in purgatory, as it were, are too miserable. The animals too dumb, the asuras too angry, the pretas too frustrated. You can take this wheel, as a matter of fact, not as referring to any actual worlds other than ours of ghosts or gods and purgatories, but you can take these 6 realms as representing states of the human mind. and the human state as representing even-mindedness, what is called in Sanskrit upeksha, equanimity. Now, when it is said then that one can become a Buddha only from the human state, it means, you see, that a Buddha stands above the gods as being released from the wheel. In very popular Buddhism, of course, as in popular Hinduism, the idea of the wheel is taken rather literally. It is, in other words, believed that the individual passes from life to life, and it's rather funny that although Buddhism actually denies the existence of an individual soul as an enduring reality, nevertheless, in Buddhist countries it is popularly believed that some sort of equivalent of the soul passes from life to life, and that if your present life is miserable, it is a result of foolish actions in the former life. But if in this life you act wisely, your birth in the next life is to be more fortunate, and you may get up, of course, to the heaven worlds, the world of the gods. But human birth is the thing that is always regarded as most fortunate, because you can be tied to the wheel not only by chains of iron, that is to say by acting wrongly, you can also be bound by chains of gold, that is by acting wisely so as to inherit good fruits. Now, of course, very sophisticated Buddhists, not only in modern times but in ancient times, did not take this idea of reincarnation literally. They looked upon it in quite a different way. And just as they regarded the six worlds as states of the human mind, so they regarded reincarnation as something happening in this life. Those of you who've read T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets will remember the passage perhaps where he says that those who have just left the platform of a station on a railway train are not those who will arrive at any destination. Those who, in other words, walked in at the door of the room and are now sitting down in chairs are not the same people as those who stepped in at the door. We are, in other words, constantly changing. Just as we know, physiologically speaking, that our bodies are, in all their molecular structure, completely changed every 7 years or so that we are, as it were, not enduring entities, but rather something like a university, where the faculty and the students and the very buildings themselves may change completely within a span of years, and yet somehow the university, or something by way of a pattern, goes on. And so, in this sense, freedom from reincarnation would be, by very sophisticated Buddhists, interpreted as freedom from the illusion that the person who came in at the door is the same one now sitting in the chair. And that in its turn signifies freedom from an emotional habit, the habit of grasping at one's own life, at seeking for continuity. And you see, the idea of continuity in Buddhist philosophy is that we desire continuity in order to perpetuate our past. In our past, in other words, we have accumulated various things: experiences, material goods, knowledge, virtues, power, so on. And the desire for continuity is the desire for the perpetuation of a past self or string of selves with which we identify ourselves. And Buddhist insight involves the recognition that the past is perpetually vanishing. There really is no past to continue, and therefore to cling to it, to identify oneself with it, is to perpetuate an illusion resulting in incessant frustration, resulting indeed in that very vicious circle which the symbol of the wheel represents.